You've tuned into InvisiYouth Chat Sessions, a video podcast series. Our episode starts right now. Here's your host, Dominique Vale.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the InvisiYouth Chat Sessions, where you can check in for your dose of stigma-breaking, motivation-filling, humor-loving life hacks and motivation tips for all the medically adultish people in your life. I'm Dominique Vale, the founder of InvisiYouth and host of InvisiYouth Chat Sessions, and today is our Season 3B, Episode 33, and I'm super excited because this episode, and especially our special guest, is long overdue because she's been a part of almost everything that we've done at InvisiYouth, from our InvisiYouth events to our Spotlight Story program, our activism campaigns. So now to bring her into the virtual programming that we do, I'm super excited. So I'm really looking forward to everyone getting to know this wonderful entrepreneur, content creator, editor, writer, model, and activist, and pretty much all-around boss lady from all of her titles. It is Devri Velázquez. So in 2011, Devri was diagnosed with a rare disease called Takayasu's arteritis, which is a rare type of vascularitis which causes blood vessel inflammation and damage to large arteries that carry blood to and from your heart to the rest of your body. And so from that diagnosis, Devri's really been on such a long health journey and life journey, really building what is wellness for her, defying those different odds, having a rare disease, and really carving a lane for herself in the chronic illness activism community, and then professionally as a writer as well, with the wonderful perspective she has on life. Through her talented skills of writing, Devri really connects with so many others and advocates for the chronic illness community, and has such a unique tone and platform for herself as a writer that's really allowed her to advocate for positive changes across the communities that affect the chronic illness and disability community. So from different chronic illnesses, from the different race groups, the different gender groups and identity, Devri really gets to tackle so many different topics that affect this wonderful and diverse community. She's written for brands like Allure, Naturally Curly, and 2190.com. She's been a speaker on podcasts, a guest on health summits, and uses her writing and visuals to really empower other women to feel and create their own individual wellness and their inner peace. So I am super excited. Devri, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to have you on. Like I said, I tell anyone all the time when I jump on our Instagram, I get very excited when Devri's posts pop up on our feed because her writing is so good. Her visuals are so good, but her writing is just so fantastic. And like I said in my intro, she has such a unique tone to her writing. So I'm really looking forward to everyone getting to have you as a guest for not only just for your writing, but now we're getting a whole visual and audio full circle moment of you being a part of InvisiYouth.
Thank you.
So we're going to jump right in and have a little fun with Devri right off the bat, and we're going to play 5-second challenge.
5-second challenge. 5-second challenge.
5-second challenge is one of our fun intro segments where I get to throw out some quirky and fun topics to Devri, and she has those 5 seconds to give us her first answer. So Devri, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, what is one thing you have accomplished during the pandemic so far?
Peace.
Oh my God. It's like the first answer is the best answer. I love that. What's something that you love? I know you're in New York City, so what's something you love from transitioning from autumn into spring?
Ooh, as far as like fashion or?
Oh, you can go any direction.
Lighter jackets.
Oh, so true. So true. If your life was going to be made into a movie, what genre do you think it would be?
A Black comedy.
Oh, love that. What's your favorite TikTok dance or trend that you've seen so far?
There's this one with like this really, it's like Mike Myers Halloween music in the background, like mic drop situation. I don't know, but it's funny. It's like 5 seconds, but it's hilarious.
I love that. If you had to describe your career in 3 words, what would you pick?
Profound, interesting, and vast.
I love that. That's a good one. What is the first thing you do when you wake up in the morning?
Breathe.
This is why it's so much better than mine. Mine was like drink coffee. What is the last thing you do before going to bed?
Dance.
That is so neat. Like a more calming one, or I don't feel like you're doing like some cardio dance routine to get to bed.
Oh yeah, I can't do cardio, but I'll do like just the weirdest dances I would never show anyone in public.
I love that. This sort of falls into that. So what is a guilty pleasure that you don't mind sharing with people?
I think I can be goofy, and people don't know that until they get close enough and I feel comfortable enough, because I do put on such a serious exterior sometimes.
Oh, I will be now on my guard to bring out the humor. And what is your favorite part of the activism side of the work that you do?
The messages and the response really just add joy to my life.
Yeah, you do. You have a really nice interactive following. You always write back to everyone in the comments. It's always really nice on your posts. You see everybody really enjoys getting to interact with you so much.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And that's going out of our 5-second challenge. We are going to jump right in. I know I said I was going to have fun and joke around with Devri, but now we're going into a dialogue conversation. So we'll bring some humor into this for sure. You guys know how we run things here. So we're going to jump right into the Break That Glass Ceiling.
Break that glass ceiling. Break that glass ceiling.
Break That Glass Ceiling is our dialogue segment for the series, where we get to talk about topics that our guests really deeply connect to, and that sometimes really can be with misconceptions or under-discussed, so we can break that metaphor of a glass ceiling on different topics. And especially getting to bring Devri in, who's such a wonderful activist across so many different communities. We wanted to really talk about a lot of those different misconceptions and how a lot of young people can help tackle those different topics. So I know I've mentioned it in your intro, but something that a lot of people in the chronic illness and disability space love is how diverse and intersectional it can be because of having such a wide range of diagnoses. And that's something you really push for in your work professionally and in your personal activism, is bringing change to improve for the BIPOC community and for women in the chronic illness community. So, and you do a lot of that through social media. So for you, how do you navigate using social media as a tool to create those opportunities for change?
For me, my advocacy and activism really started, and really just documenting my health journey started on Instagram. I was diagnosed in 2011 when Instagram started, and it was before hashtags worked, but for some reason I still would use hashtags. And then once they became optimized to be searchable, which I think was not too long after, I would use different hashtags to describe me. And, and I'm a Black woman, I'm half Mexican, I have a rare disease. And so I would hashtag all of these things, and they were just intersections of my own identity. And I realized that they were bringing in different people who represented those same identities. And so now I kind of have a melting pot of, followers, like all sorts of followers. And I'm so thankful for that, because they have shared things with me over the years as well. And I'm grateful for the dialogue and just the interactions we've had and the community that we've built together through, this common thing of us having these weird illnesses that, make us feel lonely. It just makes the Instagram and social media in general has definitely allowed me to not feel as lonely.
And I love the irony of it, that you did get diagnosed right when Instagram got created. So it was so new to everyone, but then also that's something that I know for InvisiYouth, and I know for you really do advocate using it as a tool, even just from a social side, like you said, but then also from from an actual activism tool to get dialogue happening between people. You really do showcase sort of the best sides of social media, because a lot of times people try and focus on the negativity that can happen, but you really do highlight trying to always make sure people use it in the positive tool that it can be.
Yeah, I try. I know that with like the algorithm and stuff, they, you know, it favors, having worked, I'm also on the other side of things professionally. So I know that like the algorithm favors very vain posts, you know, and so a lot of times if someone doesn't dive in and if they just take a glance at my content, it'll look like I'm just this, well, I don't know, this is my own perception. This could not be true at all, but, you know, I take a lot of selfies, or I showcase things that I know the algorithm will favor because it will capture the attention of more people. It'll get on the explore page, or, you know, it'll be more visible to more people. And my end goal is really to advocate. Like, that's always the underlying message, is to empower and advocate. But I know sometimes being in this society, being in this world, using social media, you have to trick the system sometimes, and you have to post a selfie and be unapologetic about it, you know. So I've tried over the years to navigate kind of my professional expertise and use that as a tool to, you know, garner more attention, I guess, or more reach, so that I can advocate for more people.
Oh yeah, and I love that you mentioned kind of being on the other side of it, because I will always say one of the initial photos that I had been introduced to you on was you posing in a hospital gown at a doctor's office, and you've done it a few times now that I will see other accounts will then repost it and get to share it. But it was one of my first posts, and I went, damn, I've been at that point, I've been chronically ill for 13 years, but at that point it was probably like 9 or 10 when I first was introduced to you. And I remember being like, damn, if I felt that cool in my hospital gown, my chronic illness journey would have been way different. And I just remember being so impressed that you took an experience that a lot of people in the chronic illness community, it's such a, being with doctors, you do have a lot of that stress and anxiety, but you took that moment and kind of took that ownership of it, and it was something that would appeal on social media, but you were able to then go in your caption and have such a dialogue with other people that they can then connect to it with.
Yeah.
And even kind of going off of that too, I know you have a lot of young adults who follow you and your journey. And then I know for InvisiYouth, that's our demographic, is that teen to 20s and 30s, our medically adultish, as we like to call them. But you really do use your voice to advocate for people to push for change when it's with racial inequality or gender inequality. So for a lot of young people that want to kind of make those first few steps, that they feel like they want to advocate in their inner circles or even on social media for that positive change, what are some things that you have seen would be beneficial for them to do those first few steps with?
I think in my experience, it has been helpful to engage in conversations on platforms that are already existing. Mm-hmm. Even if it's not hopping in the comment section and responding or talking to people, it's important for us to educate ourselves, especially when we want to be an ally, but we don't necessarily, we don't belong to the group that is being attacked or that needs support. It's important, for example, right now there's a lot of anti-Asian discrimination going on. I'm not Asian, but I really want to help and I want to support the community in any way I can. So I immediately go to Asian pages, or I go to my friends who are Asian and I look at their platforms and I read up on content and I educate myself on ways and practices and organizations that, are helpful and will be beneficial to the fight against, anti-Asian discrimination. And so I'm always learning, and I think it's important for a person to always be teachable. I say this to all my friends. It's like we just have to remain open vessels. Like, I never allow myself to think that I know everything or that I'm so well versed in a subject, because the minute that I do that, I'm blocking my own opportunities for growth and wisdom. So until the day that I die, I will remain teachable. And that's a commitment I've made to myself early on in life, because that to me is what profound wisdom is I will never be too proud to think that I just know everything. Even though I know a lot of things, I don't ever want to present myself as someone who brags or boasts or has a big ego in that way. And so I just encourage people to keep an open mind, because I think, especially on social media, that's a huge issue.
Yeah.
Is that it becomes a battle of the egos, and people totally miss the point sometimes because they're trying so hard to prove that they're right. And I just, that steers away, that really steers away from the issue, the greater issue sometimes.
Yeah, and I had mentioned it too when we had talked before filming, that you, during the last summer, during the Black Lives Matter protests and during those movements, you put up a video because it was during, like we still have now, wearing masks and social distancing, and you were able to sort of connect to your community for those who are in the BIPOC community, or those that were allies that wanted to, but then also connecting to your chronic illness community, going, these are some quick things that you can just do subconsciously that will now make it safe for me and for people who are in the more diverse side of the chronic illness community, that they can then take part in these protests and be part of it, not even just in a virtual sense, and getting to see so many people. I remember right when you first posted it, I saw it on like 5 or 6 of our followers and our young people. They were just reposting it right away on their Instagram story. And it was wonderful seeing so many different people who were, for us, we do our leadership in 9 different countries. So seeing people that were not even having the physical connection to the Black Lives Matter movement, because it wasn't for us, it was in the States, and they're international. They were still like, yes, this is why I want to be able to go to different protests and rallies and go to different walks, but you need to do these things to make it safe for me. And it was so approachable the way you went, okay, guys, like these are just a couple things you can do. And that's why I'm not asking for too much. I'm meeting the middle of all these different communities that I'm part of. And It was something really great to see you use a tool, but then also use your connection to so many different communities so people could easily relate to what you were saying.
Yeah.
And even kind of going off of that too, I know something that we hear all the time is for our young adults, they want to advocate for more than just the chronic illness space, whether they want to advocate for gender inequality, or they connect directly to the BIPOC community, or even beyond that, they have a strong connection to environmentalism or other topics, and they want to do different activism. But when you're chronically ill, a lot of people say you got to save your energy, pick one thing and only do that. But I know for you, even professionally, you really tap into all the different parts and facets of yourself, and you do that with professionally. So for young people that feel like I don't want to advocate for too many things and feel like I'm being a part of too many circles, how do you sort of use your voice to talk about different topics and more?
I see, and that's totally valid if a person feels like they are doing too much, but I personally think that there's never too much to be done. So I say that if duality exists, and I am a person who, I listen to every single genre of music. I like all sorts of movies, all sorts of hobbies and things, and I would never deprive myself or cut off one of my interests in order to like minimize myself and fit myself in a box. Like, I am multifaceted, and I'm going to embrace all of those things. If I am, I in 2019, I did a lot of marches and advocacy around environmentalism and, just the green movement and all of those things. But I'm also, you know, when Black Lives Matter has been revving up in the past year, I stepped up in that sense as well. And like those things, they go hand in hand. A lot of these issues, a lot of, you know, social and environmental issues and racial issues and class issues, like they all go hand in hand. And I'm someone who's such an advocate, hardcore for gender equality and acknowledging the spectrum of genders that exist. And, you know, because I have friends who don't feel seen, and I know what it's like to not feel seen. I know what it's like to not feel represented in media or in society, to feel overlooked. Like, I know what all those things feel like. So for me, it's just an extension of my compassion towards humans and towards the earth and towards all of these things that need, you know, some loving and some care. And so I don't think that anyone should ever feel like they have to minimize any part of their identity. Like, I'm so proud of every single thing that I am. And while one group of friends might think it's super weird that I love this type of music, like, I don't care. That's fine, you know, like, but that's just me. And I understand that it could be hard for people to feel that comfortable in their skin. But just know that I affirm you. And I think that the weirder, the better. So, you know.
And I like how you kind of even phrase that too with work. It's a big thing that I'll always say is you find the way that you like to communicate, whether that's through visuals, through words, through video, and it's sort of the way your tone, your lens of how you view the world is going to be you, but you can always change the tone based on which of the topics you are talking about. So it's still always very you. And I know even for yourself and for me, writing is such a big portion professionally, but then also how you connect and do advocacy. So, and everything, and I'll always, for any posts of yours, you can always tell when it's your writing, and you can always tell when it's you, and the topics can change and sort of where you're going with conversations can change, but it's always your tone. So I think, like you said too, never feel like you have to diminish or dim part of yourself in something you're passionate about, but always be able to kind of shift your focus within the lens that works the best for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And kind of the last part of it, I know you mentioned it before, but talking about, for those who listen just to our podcast, they might not know this, but I'll give you a spoiler. I am a white woman hosting the show. So my role is ally in the conversation that Devri and I are having. So I know for me, I always love learning more about what for allies and for the young people coming into my charity, but also our allies, whether it's guys in the chronic illness community wanting to help with the young women that we work with, or those like myself who are part of the white chronic illness or disability community that want to help for racial inequality. They want to know how to be a best ally. And there's so many conversations now of do this reading, follow these people. There's so many tools being said to do the work is the phrase, but that's such a broad statement to make. So for you, what are things that you would suggest for allies that want to really be able to align themselves and make their steps for positive change for different communities?
I think the biggest conversation I've had with some of my white friends, especially in the past year, is make sure that in your activism, in your advocacy, that you are not stealing the mic from other BIPOC people, any person of color, you know, and I've had an issue with that with a close friend who just, you know, really wanted to try, and I was trying to be patient with her, but I think the big issue is that sometimes people, especially white allies, like they will totally bulldoze the conversation, and now it's about them, and it's about, you know, and not even just white allies, but even leaders of social movements. I've noticed that throughout the years at various marches, you know, the person with the megaphone who's in the front of the march, like taking advantage of all the photo ops. And I think that it's not just a race issue, but I think that in these greater social movements, it can become problematic when a person is looking to amplify their own ego through a movement. I think that totally misses the point. And it's about us as a community and how we can come together. And it's not a moment for someone to like exhibit their God complex, you know? And I've witnessed that a lot. I've experienced that. And even when people put that type of pressure on me, I'm like, look, you know, like in a lot of professional settings, I've dealt with that where I'm the diversity hire because of the work I do. I'm usually the only woman of color in a leadership position or any, you know, in the roles that I'm in corporate America. And, and it's tough. It's a lot of pressure. I'm like, just because you know me or just because I work here doesn't mean that you know all Black people because I only represent myself. And I've dealt with that in a lot of company structures where they will rely on me to be like their end all be all for like the Black voice or the Black woman voice. And I'm like, yo, I'm not, that's too much pressure. And I wouldn't feel right within if I thought that I was representing all Black people because I'm not. I'm a mixed race woman and I'm queer and I'm all of these other things that, you know, I wouldn't ever want to take away from those people's voices and exclude them from their own conversation. Like, so that's just something that, you know, we have to be mindful of. And white allies definitely it's just visually, you know, metaphorically, like don't steal the mic from someone. If anything, like turn their mic up, hold the mic up to their mouth, and that's how you can become an ally in them amplifying their voice, but don't make it about you.
Yeah, I love that you said that because I think one thing that I've, through the chronic illness community and then especially having worked, like we said, in chronic illness, it's so intersectional. So you'll end up having people that want to publicly work with your charity versus our volunteers more behind the scenes that are a part of so many different communities that it's been learning for me. Even though I'm the founder of the charity, I always will go to even my teenage volunteers that are a part of different communities that I'm not part of and ask them, well, who do you think we should be following, or what should we be reading, or how can we change the way we use different verbiage? And it's always, like you said, getting different opinions, not going to the one most vocal of my our volunteers that might be part of one community, but getting, like you said, don't make one person your solo person in the test group. Like have multiple people in your test group to get different opinions is great. And it's also like doing the little things, doing some reading, following some people, but reposting those people you then like. Doing something like that seems so small and simple, but you're then amplifying that voice and sharing it with your network, even just socially. And there's so many little ways to open doors repetitively that you can kind of do in so many different settings that don't feel like it's one big task to be like, this is my big project as an ally to do to make this happen. But there's little things you can do to experience other communities and then be that ally, like you said, showcasing and amplifying that other voice, but not saying, look at how I'm doing it. It's more just take the moment. I'm going to then move the camera over here and look at this. If I'm the reason you're looking, that's great, but like move the camera lens over. And I think, like you said, that's really wonderful, is people kind of taking themselves out of the equation and just sort of seeing what the end goal of what they're sharing and learning about. That's the best portion of it. Absolutely. And it's so hard to transition out of this, but we're going to be transitioning into our intermission segment soon. But like I had mentioned in the beginning, this is our virtual program that Devri's been a part of so many different projects through InvisiYouth Charity. And we get to provide all of that for free because we have wonderful donors like a lot of our listeners and viewers. So we always, everything that we provide, we always try to maintain providing for free. So we always include our donation link. If you can donate, wonderful. If you can continue paying it forward and sharing our podcast and YouTube through more people so we can connect to more individuals, we always thoroughly appreciate that. It helps keeps our lights on and helps us get to share more of our resources and tools with more young people. So we have that link below. You'll see it pop up. It's in our description box as well. And so before we go into our next portion, I'm going to then be getting to take a break. So Devri will be telling all of us a story, guys. It's your favorite segment. It's my favorite segment. It's So That One Time.
So that one time.
You all know So That One Time is my personal favorite, where my guests get to tell me a story from their life. It can be funny, somber, anywhere in between, and I don't know about it. So we are all going to be learning the story in the same time. So Devri, I'm going to drink my coffee and have you tell me a story.
Okay. So one thing that I used to do as a writer, I've been writing since I can remember. I started reading at a young age. I read and finished my first novel when I was 4 years old. I remember it was about a haunted house, and that is when I first became super fascinated with horror and all things scary and paranormal. That was like my thing, and it still is my thing. I watch horror movies as a form of comfort. And I remember throughout elementary school, my dad was a huge supporter in all of my literary loves and curiosities, and he would take my sister and I, she's 1 year younger than me, he would take both of us to the library on the weekends, and we would just sit there for hours and pull out all sorts of novels and books, and we would read. And I remember my sister and I were really drawn to Dracula. And then there were a whole bunch of like old mystery novels from the 70s that my dad pointed us to from his childhood. And one was Nancy Drew, another one was like the Hardy Boys or something. And I was like, I want to try to write a mystery. I want to try to start writing short stories. And I was about 5 or 6. I was in like first grade when I took it upon myself to start searching for local writing contests. And this was before the internet was popular. This was like 1995. So our computer, the one computer we had at home, was like this huge thing that had
dial-up. It took a long time to load.
And it had like solitaire and pinball, but no internet, no actual like. It was terrible, and Google didn't exist, I don't think. So I would search like newspapers and magazines. I was addicted to magazines, and I would always look at the end and look for any sort of contest. And at school, during my standardized tests, after I would receive my standardized test back, the written portion, I thought to myself, if I'm continuing to score all these high scores and getting all these, commendable, comments from my teachers about my writing, why not repurpose the writing portion into like contests and enter this into local contests, and, and I could win some money, and then I can maybe fund, I was really into classical music, and I wanted to buy a violin, but my parents couldn't afford one. So I was like, maybe I can start saving up to get a violin, and then I can start getting lessons, private lessons. And so that was like the peak, or like the beginning of my writing career. And like the first time I started monetizing my writing and realizing that, and no one taught me this, but it was just something that like came to me. I knew that money existed. I knew that writers existed, and I knew I was good at writing, or that people somehow enjoyed my writing. And I didn't want to be wasteful. I didn't want to just throw away my written portions of my test after I get a good score, a good grade. So I would enter them into contests, and my parents had no idea that I was doing that. No one knew. Oh, no. But I would win a whole bunch of contests. And that was the beginning of me kind of getting the accolades around my writing, and like really starting to feel confident in the fact that, wow, when I get older, like this, I could do this for a living, and I can really make this into a career. And that's how it all began. So
first off, I love that you had like a side business hustle as like a young kid. I can just imagine your dad being like, why is Devri's bank account look a lot larger than it should be at 12 years old? Like this is, and then I also thoroughly enjoy that you have an interest in the spooky and horror. I'm terrified of everything, but I do enjoy watching. Like my brother-in-law finds it funny that I get spooked if somebody comes into the room that I'm not physically watching. I will scream and just get startled, but I will watch every ghost hunter show on the Discovery Network.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how you match the two parts of your personality, that you will watch ghost hunters, but then you scream if I just say your name too loudly in a quiet room. So I thoroughly love that is just that was the beginning of your writing career, was enjoying all of the spooky, and it's so fun.
Yeah. When I was in 5th grade, I recreated, my dad bought a camcorder and some camera equipment, and I recreated with my neighborhood friends, Blair Witch Project. And it was like, I called it Mabel Woods, and I submitted it to HBO when I was like 11 years old.
Circle the Mac, Devri, circle the Mac. Be like, do you remember getting this? I love that. Oh my God. And now that you just perfectly transitioned into our next segment, because we are going to be getting all of the guidebook tips from Devri as a professional writer. That this has been a long road for Devri as a professional. So we're going to go into Medically Adultish Guidebook.
Medically Adultish Guidebook.
Medically Adultish Guidebook is for all of our young adults. As we know, you tend to straddle that line between being a young person, going into your 20s and 30s, and then also growing as a young person with a chronic illness. So our guidebook is we get to go to our guests, and they get to explain to them their guidebook of life. And for Devri, we want to go into her as a writer and a content creator and activist, and what has really been tools and tips that she would then pay forward to others. So I know with you being a freelancer and a writer and a content creator, you tend to wear the hats of being a writer and an activist, but then also wearing the hat as your own manager and your own publicist in that way. So for a lot of young people, especially in chronic illness, you're said, oh, try the entrepreneurial route. It tends to be a good suggestion for many people. So how do you do that organization and balance between being the creator of your content, but then also managing your career at the same time?
One of the things that I've taken advantage of is like the fact that I am at the doctor a lot, the fact that I'm in New York, I'm on the train a lot en route. There's a lot of still moments for me. Even I have really bad insomnia, and I wake up at the strangest hours of the night, and it's hard for me to sleep during the day when the sun is out. So I take advantage of that in the middle of the night. I will literally I did that this morning. I wake up, I'll turn on a light, I sit at my computer, or I'll pull out my notebook, and I'll start journaling, or I'll start jotting down notes in my phone. And they don't have to make sense. You know, I'm a firm believer in stream of consciousness and just letting something flow. And if I don't have the physical capacity to actually write or type, I will just send myself on my phone like voice notes. And I will say whatever I'm feeling, if I feel like it's profound or it's something I don't want to forget because my memory is terrible. And I will come back to it once I fall back asleep, and then I wake back up. Whenever I'm in a better place to collect all of those thoughts, then I'll go back and look at the notes, or I'll listen to them, and I'll put something together if there's something there that I think could be helpful to other people. And I would take advantage of those hours in the night to email a lot of brands, or when I was first thinking of ways to monetize, besides just getting published on a publication, I thought, in the meantime, what else can I do with my platform to monetize?
Yeah.
And I would email a bunch of brands years ago, and I would do this, at like 4 a.m. And by the time I went back to sleep and I would wake up, I would be like a kid on Christmas looking at my inbox, because I would look forward to any responses, since I knew for sure I was going to be at the top of everyone's inbox.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is definitely a suggestion that was helpful for me when I used to pitch a lot of brands. I don't do that as much now, because the cool thing about it is that once you've built up like great momentum in that, and you've had a number of partnerships and collaborations, you can sit back, and now the work does its like the job is done for you.
Yeah.
You'll get people inquiring about your work. But also just pitching, not just pitching for like collaborations and sponsorships, but also events and any sort of idea that I have. I always think, who would I want to help me support this idea? If it's a live event, and I've worked with agencies and all sorts of Fortune 500 companies to support like the resources for a live event, where I was like, just trust me, trust what I'm doing here. And yeah, it all started with those pitch emails, and me really proving the concept, not just having an idea, but doing all the work for their team, for the marketing team of those brands and those organizations, so that all they have to do is say yes. And I just I created the whole plan for them and the whole strategy, and letting them know, in return, in exchange, if I'm going to provide myself as talent or as whatever it is, if it's my writing or my speaking, or my presence, like in turn, you are going to garner more people who look like me. You're going to get a more diverse audience or clientele, whatever you want, because I do represent so many intersections and identities, it's a win-win for everyone. And especially now in 2021, it's a huge thing that I'm noticing in my work on the other side of things, that a lot of companies are really seeking out diverse people, and they want to advocate representation in their companies. And so it's like going back to earlier, what we were talking about, people dimming a part of themselves, or shrinking themselves to fit inside of a certain box. Don't do that, because companies, I swear, they are looking at every part of yourself that you showcase online or showcase through your words and your actions. They are looking at all of those things, and the more genuine that you appear and the more confident you appear, that will work with you and not against you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I love when you kind of, even going back to the beginning portion of what you were saying, when you have a chronic illness, you do medical doctors and doing physical therapy or different breaks you have to take. Your week tends to have some sort of schedule built into it, and taking advantage of those moments that you're waiting, you're commuting to and from a doctor or an appointment, you're waiting at a doctor, sort of taking advantage of those moments, like you said, is something that for people in the chronic illness and disability space, we tend to just wait. in those times. And like you said, no, you use those times as a benefit to you. That can be your sort of scheduling time that you'll always set for yourself, or make sure that you'll check off different people from more of your management side of, okay, these are the people I'm going to email while I'm waiting between doctors or on these different days. And it's sort of really using that to using your health schedule to your benefit as the person that creates the content or does the work that you're doing is super beneficial. I do have to ask though, when you said that you will email at all hours of the night, I do the same thing. Have you ever emailed a pitch and then woken up the next day and went, I don't remember pitching myself to this person? Because I have.
Yes, I definitely have. But it usually pays off. So
it's always you're like, ooh, why is this in my inbox? Oh, wow, I emailed them. What did I say? Oh, that was a good email. Tends to become my downward thought process for sure. And like I've said probably about 5 times in this podcast so far, but when it comes to you as a writer, you have such a unique tone. Your captions I live for. I will fangirl all the time, because if you haven't, I'm so glad Devri's links will be in here so you guys can just scroll the feed of Devri's writing as well. But so for you, I know, like you said, you use social media, not just socially connecting with your friends. I know you live in New York, but you're from Texas, so you have a lot of people that are all over the country that are in your social network as well. But it is a tool for you professionally. So for when you're coming up with those photos to use or captions to write, is there something that you've sort of developed as your go-to process of how you come up with the captions or which photos you are thinking of using?
Yeah, a lot of times as a person who, like, for example, this whole year I've been really ill. I just had an oral surgery 2 days ago, and that's why I'm kind of talking funny. But I have had a lot of time where I'm not photogenic. And I have so many photos stored from days that I felt really great and days that I had friends around who took pictures of me, or if I was part of a campaign, because I model also. So if I was a part of a campaign at some point, I have my Dropbox apps and my photo apps on my phone, and sometimes it's fun to just go look through those folders. And if I'm feeling inspired by a book, that I've read, and that's usually how it starts. It'll be a combination of the two. I always post when I am usually like in bed or feeling down about how I am that day, my current state that day. And I will post a picture that I like about a picture that I like of myself in order to boost my own confidence. And then I'll couple that with a caption from a book that I'm currently reading or an author who I really like. And that's my typical process when I'm quoting. When I have captions of quotes, it's always from a book that I've read. It's always from an author who I actually personally like, or I'll have their book on my shelf. That's no hate towards anyone who uses like a generic like Drake caption or something. But I just have to put that out there. I only quote authors and books and theories and concepts that I actually personally believe in, which it's an array of like all sorts of weird genres and everything. And then for my own personal, when I use captions that are just my own personal thoughts, those come from those voice notes and the stream of consciousness and the random journaling sessions that I do for myself. And sometimes they make sense, but sometimes they don't. And I don't put too much thought about if they do make sense or not. And then me doing that is also just me being mindful of people who prefer visuals and people who prefer to read. So I have a huge audience that is hard of hearing or hard of seeing, people who are visually impaired and who use apps to transcribe the message. And so I like to use a visual that can stand on its own or a caption that can stand on its own, because I know a lot of people like image descriptions. And so when I'm just sharing a quote from an author I enjoy or a book I enjoy, I just think, okay, maybe it's not completely necessary that they know that this image, that this caption is paired with like a selfie. You know, the selfie is for like the visual people, and the caption is hopefully to touch on people who want to read.
Yeah, and I like that you kind of point that having, I know for us as well, having that alt text is super important. And it's so simple for people even just to dictate into their phone while they're posting an Instagram caption, just hitting it, saying this is what my photo looks like. Yeah. So it is, like you said, it's something super easy that everybody can do, even just socially. For a lot of people don't even know in their friend groups if somebody might be hard of hearing or visually impaired. So it is super important on that end. I know one thing we've learned over the past year or two with Instagram coming out with highlights, I know we've been suggesting to a lot of our young people that it is a way of you kind of differentiating things that are more social that you want to remember, and then professional moments of yours. And it does kind of become a good point, especially for people with brain fogging or memory loss, that you can kind of click onto it and go, okay, these were my favorite things that I've written, or the most interactive posts that I've had. And you're able to then kind of quickly draw upon something of yours and see, okay, maybe I'll try something in this direction, or these are my favorite posts that I've mentioned or things that I've written. And it's helpful to kind of have in a quick Rolodex that's on an app of that way as well. Yes.
And also closed captions on videos. I always make sure that I add captions, because I am someone who likes to read captions when I'm watching a video as well.
Yeah, it's definitely super important. I know something else that's super important to you is having that balance of wellness while you're doing work, especially being someone in the chronic illness community. I know even for myself, we're both the women in charge of our own work as well, being our own bosses in that regard. So what are things that are your kind of go-tos when you're trying to give yourself that self-care, you feel like you need to provide that wellness that you would suggest to other people?
It's important for me to always take a step back when I feel empty or depleted, and I don't feel bad about when I do that, because it's part of the greater picture. So we have to remember that part of our self-care is not just giving, but to others, but giving to ourselves, and we can't leave ourselves out of the equation. So if we need to take some deep breaths, or if we need to go take a nap, or if we need to put our phone on Do Not Disturb, and, then we should do that. And we should feel empowered to know that that's okay. And that's something that I'm learning all the time for myself, is just not being so hard on myself to put all this pressure to accomplish things. Sometimes the best that I'll accomplish that day is the fact that I took a shower, and that's okay. That's great. That's worth me clapping for, and I'm learning that is part of the process. That's going to be part of my success, is knowing when I need to take breaks and I need to rest.
Yeah, and I love that. I know something someone suggested to me was, they said, I would always tell a lot of our younger brand leaders or our volunteers, and like, if you're having a lot of health issues, set up a power hour and just give yourself that full focused hour of attention. And then if you need to take time away from that and take a break from that, at least you're in your brain, you've checked off that accomplishment for yourself because you designated a portion of time. And someone said, well, you should also then say power hours and power breaks are equally important. And it was like a nice reminder for myself, like you said, to stop being so hard on yourself, saying, well, it's equally as important to designate that hour of time if I know that I'm hitting my wall health-wise, but also being able to kind of see on my schedule, like, okay, I know I'm going to be booked for a little bit. So I'm intentionally going to give myself that break, and seeing it put into my schedule, it feels like it's less of something I will then feel guilty for. And it's more like you're putting it in, there's an intention behind you giving yourself that moment of taking a pause, pulling back from work. Like you said too, you're able to provide the best of yourself when you give to yourself and don't just give away portions of yourself.
Yeah.
And that's such a good point to kind of then switch to our last segment on. And the irony is our last segment is called First Few Words. So we're full circle on this whole thing. So we're going to go into our final segment with Devri on First Few Words.
First few words.
First Few Words is quite like the name. It's when we have friends, families, coworkers, our virtual community, as we'll say. A lot of times having those first few words in a conversation tend to be the hardest ones to come up with. So we always ask our guests to talk about different topics or conversations that a lot of people in the chronic illness and disability community will get put into, and what they would suggest in those scenarios to be the first few words for people to use. So I know, especially in the chronic illness and disability space, and like you had mentioned as well, for yourself, it's so intersectional, and for so many other people, when you're asked those uncomfortable questions by other people, we always feel like we need to answer those questions when people do, whether it's virtually on social media, or it's within you being in a social setting with other people, with friends that want to ask about your health or ask about your experience. So for you, what has worked for you in ways of answering those why questions that people might ask?
One of the, I'm really huge on boundaries. And so I will just straight up say to someone, I don't feel comfortable answering that. If I sense that it's not coming from a genuine place, if they're asking me a question, or if they attempt to just tell me, give me their advice, I'll let them know, hey, you're projecting onto me. And I use a lot of psychology terms because they can't argue with that.
So you're like, this sounds super educated, so we're going to work with it.
Or if someone tries to invalidate something that I feel, I'll say, you can't speak for me better than I can speak for me. Yeah. Which happens a lot. And people do these things without sometimes they don't mean any harm by it, but people still do these things. And I will stop people in their tracks, friends, family members, and I'll say, hey, you are trying to speak for me and you don't understand how I feel or my experience. So this is a moment to learn, and this is an opportunity to listen to what I'm telling you I feel. And I've said that, and people, it really does stop people in their tracks, and they're like, whoa. And then, a lot of times, because they don't realize they're doing that, they'll take accountability, and going forward, hopefully they will start validating my needs and my requests and, concerns.
Yeah, and I love that you said that too, because in all cap letters on my card, I wrote boundaries with 3 exclamation points. So we were right on the same track with that. I love how you said that too, because and I'll always tell, especially people that are in that university postgraduate life, they're in new careers with new people around them. Just because you answer questions on some days doesn't mean you have to answer questions on every day. And like you said, it is that instinct of going, I feel some people, like you said, it's very harmless. They don't know. And you being able to remind them of that, they do know, okay, I didn't realize I had stepped over that line, but other people you do. And I always say, trust that inner instinct you have when you're in a medical setting. You're going to have that same instinct socially when somebody asks you a question. And like you said, it really is using that prime knowledge that you have of you're the best person to answer questions on your health, because you're in that in your body every day. So you're the best advocate, and then you're also the best answer to those questions of telling people moving forward, don't use this scenario when you get to speak with other people who might be like me that you interact with, because it's something that they can then move it forward in a more beneficial way with other people that they interact with.
Yeah.
And even one thing we'll hear, especially I know through this past year, through the pandemic, and through a lot of like with the Black Lives Matter movement last year, when people through the Me Too movement as well with gender inequality, a lot of people will say, well, I didn't want to say the wrong thing, or I didn't want to sound this way, so I don't say anything because I don't know what to say without saying the wrong thing. And it's that nervousness of not saying the right thing. So what would be advice that you would give to people? Because we always say silence is that complacency, and it is one of the worst things to do. So for people that are nervous of making a mistake, how would you give them that advice so they can have those first few words of conversation?
Yeah. Audre Lorde, I think she was the one who said, she quoted or said, choosing silence is choosing the side of the oppressor. So it's better to speak up and not know what you're saying, or not be afraid of being, not articulating your ideas correctly, versus just being silent on an issue. And another way to look at it, people who don't speak English, people from other countries who speak a different language, when you're in their country, they will absolutely appreciate when you try to say things in their language. And I have witnessed that, and I've been a part of that, and it is, even coming from my Spanish speaking side of my family, there's so much appreciation towards people who will try to pronounce a word in Spanish and try to speak their language, versus like, even if they're not okay, if it doesn't sound right, if it doesn't sound correct, people, I think they appreciate the effort. And so we have to just be okay with not sounding cool or right, or having all the words to like articulate something eloquently and beautifully. We just have to say something. We have to acknowledge that issues exist, and that's the first step.
Yeah, and I love that I feel like so horrible. You're going from like a wonderful quote, and I'm going to say from watching The Bachelor recently, but it was something they had, which is a lot of controversy in itself in America for my international community knows about what's been going on this season as well. But when they had a recent episode with after the final rose host, Emilio Acho said it, he said it in such an eloquent way that I'm like, now I can use this quote for people, when he said, ignorance isn't a bad thing. You can grow from ignorance, because it's just something you were not educated on, and you can now become educated and grow from it. And I think having an ignorance in any subject, whether it's the chronic illness community and having a little more of an ableist bias, within racial inequality, gender inequality, it is, if you have an ignorance to it, you can move forward from it. So saying something that might come off ignorant is okay, in the sense that you can grow from that. And I think that was something was really wonderful to hear somebody say on a national primetime show with a very diverse audience listening to just one simple sentence. But I think, like you said too, taking a step of saying something and knowing that being ignorant on a topic isn't a bad thing is great, because even in your comments, if people ask you a question on a post, that other people might start commenting and saying, that was so wrong to say, or don't say it. You've always come in going, this is where you can learn, don't say it this way, next time say something like this. And you really use, even in replying to people, as a moment of let me give you a little more education on how you can say things moving forward. And everyone always seems that there's an appreciation to it when you can then learn from going, oh, okay, what can I say next time? Or how should I look at this next time? And that's a really good growth moment for yourself.
Yeah.
And even kind of going into our final question, we always ask this past season, we always ask our guests to give a piece of advice. So I wanted for you, you've really built not only your voice as an activist, but also in your professional work as a writer. And you really have honed in on your voice and your platform as an individual. And it's something, like you said, you are an open vessel. You love that about yourself, that you are always growing and educating and evolving. So what would be that sort of biggest piece of advice for other young people that want to kind of sharpen their voice as an advocate, or just in their day to day, and still keep that open-mindedness for themselves to learn?
The biggest thing, I think, is just to know that we all need to hear your story, and we need to hear everyone's story. And it's so important that, you know, it ties into other things we've mentioned on this podcast about not dimming your light, not being afraid to show all of your colors, all your sides, you know, really embrace every part of yourself, because there's someone out there in the world who needs to see all of those things strung together in one person. And I have, you know, in the past, I've been afraid or, you know, worried, I guess, of what people will think if they know that I listen to all these types of music and, or I'll dress a certain way or whatever. But it's like, once I broke through those fears or those worries of how I'll be deemed by society, like I've never felt more freer. And I just really embrace people to speak from their own experiences. As an editor, I've always told my writers, you know, speak in I statements, because no one will own your story like you. And we all need to hear your story. We don't need to hear what you think the world wants to hear. We need to hear your story. So anything you feel, anything you observe or like or don't like, we need to hear it, and we need to know why.
I love that. Like you said, there's a uniqueness in every person, and in that creates community. And I love that's so. If I had any doubt that you would end this podcast on a fantastic piece of advice, just as always, that if we're going to cut out a section for this episode, we're just going to put that as our footnote for this moving forward. I absolutely love that. Devri, like I said, I absolutely admired and respected you as a writer and an activist for years. I've loved having you be so supportive of the InvisiYouth community, us getting to see so many more people find you and your platform and really feel like they get to grow through the work that you do as well. So what I want is tell everybody where they can find you on social media and find the work that you're doing.
Yeah, everything online is my name. So it's Devri, Devri, and my last name is Velázquez, but it starts with a V. So hopefully it'll auto-populate on any search engine. And my portfolio is devrivelazquezwork.com. And then I have a blog, devrivelazquez.com. But everything is just my name. So Instagram, all of that.
We're going to have everything linked below as well, and hyperlinked in our YouTube description. And then it will be written in the podcast notes as well, so you can find everyone. And we knew vicariously. I don't know why. I just figured out we had the same initials. I was like, that's exactly why. I was like, that is exactly why. Intuitively, I knew I would connect right away to you, Devri. And like always, you can find InvisiYouth on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at InvisiYouth, and all podcast platforms in our YouTube channel as well. Devri, thank you so much for being our guest on this episode. I had an absolute blast getting to record with you.
Thank you. This was really fun.
So much fun, guys. I'm really looking forward to our next episode with you. So enjoy, and I will speak with you soon. Bye, everyone.